I'm an idiot. Does this microphone thing work? There we go. I am an idiot. I'm a very clever idiot, but I'm an idiot. This is very important to start off with. By the way, as we get started here, half full or half empty? Half full? Anybody get any other answers? It's completely full. Because it's half full of liquid and half full of air. It turns out that the optimists are right. So once you stop looking at your local TV shows, you'll realize that the optimists are right. Actually, before we get into my talk, there's another thing as well. So for this session here, you've been here for about 40 minutes or so. In the last 40 minutes that you have been sitting in this room, how far have you physically moved? Meters or kilometers? Anybody got a guess? Sorry? 700 miles. And why is that? So we do 1,200 miles per hour at this latitude. But so we travel at around 1,200, kilometers per hour. So even if you didn't notice it, in the last 40 minutes, you've all gone around 700-800 kilometers. Anybody got a different answer? You've also gone about 30,000 kilometers. Why is that? We go around the sun at around 40,000 kilometers per hour. Anybody got another answer? So we've got around, I think it's 600,000 kilometers, because the galaxy, the Milky Way, travels at 800,000 kilometers per hour. The reason why I'm starting with this bottle, hopefully you'll remember the bottle, and about this thing about time, is that you obviously can't get more real than measurable physical distance. And yet, if you change your perspective, you get a different answer. And what I find fascinating as we talk about, for me, I'll be looking at AI leadership, is that right now a lot will go down to what is your perspective. So if you think you're happy or you think you're sad, you're both right. But let's get into this. And that's as well. By the way, this is my QR code to connect with me on LinkedIn, so that you can all connect with me at the same time, because whilst you exchange lots of business cards, this is better. Because now we have different ways of doing things. Einstein used to teach undergraduate physics at Princeton University. His second-year students would get a bit of a surprise, because when they sat down in their second-year examination, in front of them was their first-year examination questions. Well, eventually, a professor, like a student, will be brave enough to say, well, Professor Einstein, I think you've made a mistake. You've given us last year's questions. Einstein would just smile and say, well, whilst it's true that I've given you last year's questions, this year, the answers are all different. And particularly if we look now, and the topic that I'll be talking about, and particularly in the context of artificial intelligence, which is my focus for now, if we look at just how much difference there has been already in this year alone, and then see what's going to happen next. So, by the way, how many of you use ChatGPT? How many of you are using it right now? But just to give you an idea of the pace of change. So there's a terminology called a prompt, just like asking the gadget to go do stuff. So here are two prompts, and these are sort of pretty classic prompts. One is, make me a picture. So this is an image AI called Midjourney. Make me a pizza slice with pepperoni and dripping cheese, food photography, studio lighting, professional photography, stock image. That's one prompt. Second prompt, a blue bird having coffee with a puppy in Venice, Italy. So let's have a look. Are you impressed by these pictures? Crap, total crap. This is version 1 of Midjourney when it came out, and it is awful. Kind of a scary-looking pizza. But what's that? I don't know. This is Midjourney version 5. It came out in March of 2023. And this is now what it looks like. And if any of you have ever done food photography, this is a fantastic picture of pizza, which is unique. It's not picked up from the internet. It has been created on the fly. Let's look at a bit more complicated thing. Remember the bluebird, mangled, garbage, hideous thing? This is a bluebird with a dog and a cup of coffee with a background that probably plausibly could be Venice. But that is not the interesting thing. The interesting thing is that the difference between the shitty version and the good version is only 11 months. Not even a year. There's a company called Character AI that allows you to, whatever, talk to celebrities and dead people. This company is now just about a year old. It has 200 million end users, almost $1 billion company. And all it's doing is using these sort of fundamental large language models, these sort of AI for text. It allows you to have chats with them. Crazy stuff. I think the other thing, when you get into it, that makes me very interested is whatever AI goes multimodal. That sounds very fancy, but what it means text, it means audio, it means video, images. In fact, I had done for a previous talk, had my Einstein story translated into Urdu, had put it into phonetic Urdu so that I would be able to speak it and copy it, sounding like Urdu directly. Or I could have used a voice clone. Anybody have done voice cloning before? You probably should know about this, because it's pretty much you take 1 minute of audio of anybody, and you would be able to, you should ask permission obviously, but have that person speak words that they never said, sometimes in languages that they don't speak either. Crazy stuff. But an example about how crazy we're going to get. And by the way, when I look at crazy, this is today crazy. I'm not talking about what's coming next. I'm saying this thing has already been done in 2023. So this is old stuff. So right now, many of you will have seen the Boston Dynamics robot dog. I don't know if you've seen the video of the Boston Dynamics robot dog with ChatGPT. Fascinating. What happens is that robot dog clearly uses AI, machine learning to process, go up, go down, how the sensors work. But some researchers decided, wouldn't it be fascinating if we gave the robot dog ChatGPT? Now, it doesn't have internet connection at the time. This was early days. All they gave it then was a microphone, a speaker, and then it gave it access to GPT, and GPT had access to the system's whatever output. But so now it means that before the robot would be loaded up to say, go into the room, find a bucket, come back. But it didn't know what a bucket was. Well, now because ChatGPT has got 15 terabytes of human knowledge, it's read every book by Shakespeare, Cervantes, it just knows a lot of stuff. Now the little robot can go over and say, well, I've had a look. There are 2 buckets. Do you want the red one or the green one? I could carry the green one, but it's full of water and there's a fish in it. What should I do? And all they did was add ChatGPT to an existing system. So what I've become fascinated about is how the thing that concerns me, the big picture thing, particularly in a sort of area like this, is how can you use the sort of artificial intelligence to supercharge individuals? How do you then incorporate it into your products and services? But then also, how do you basically supercharge entire companies with these things rather than just being us, let's say, being professionally more useful? Now, would anybody like some advice on using ChatGPT to do it better? So this is like a quick diversion from big picture to small picture. First thing that I would like you to advise is that when GPT gives you an answer, don't accept its answer. Just say, it's okay, but not very good. Please make it better. Tell me what you've changed and tell me why you've changed it. That alone will give you dramatically better answers. If you want it to be more creative, one fun thing that I've been doing is that it turns out if you are polite to ChatGPT and are smiling and positive, it will give you better answers because it's using 15 terabytes of human speech and knowledge. It turns out that when people say please and thank you and are respectful, humans behave better. ChatGPT is exactly the same thing. And in fact, for my creative work, what I've often said to GPT is to say, imagine you've had a good night's sleep and you've woken up refreshed. What are your ideas? And it comes up with better ideas. But here we go. What we're looking at here is that I was having an argument with a German professor. And this German professor was convinced that ChatGPT was no better than a spoon and a bowl of ice cream. It is a tool, just a tool. It doesn't know the taste of ice cream. It doesn't know the texture. It doesn't know the flavor. It is just a tool. Well, I wanted to disprove this professor. He was very annoying anyway. But so, to disprove this thing, I decided to make an AI cookbook as an experiment. Have any of you done cooking with ChatGPT yet? You will now, if you haven't done yet. But what I did was I decided to write a cookbook. Now, I've never written a cookbook before. I wrote about 150 pages of the cookbook, including recipes and pictures, in 2 weeks, which is quite fast. But for me, making my cookbook, I actually started off, and this is an app I built as well to do this. I started off by getting GPT to say, please can you invent some countries for me? And it invented countries. It invented the pictures of the countries, the language of the countries, its song, its dance. Very, very good. I then said, well, please can you invent its favorite handheld desserts or snacks or main dishes? And then it invents for each of the imaginary countries an imaginary dish. Now what comes up, it has the recipe, it has the story around the traditional recipe. But then I thought, well, maybe you don't like some of the ingredients. Maybe you'd like to change the recipe. So in this case then, so right now, here is the recipe is put in, and then you can actually talk to the recipe to say, well, can you please make it for 10 people instead of 4, and can you add some exotic fruits? And it changes the recipe on the fly. Imagine looking at a newspaper where for every single person, the news stories are different because it fits what they want to see. This is today's stuff. So one of the things that I've been looking at now is, let's say, being a very practical perspective, AI and leadership. Now, I've been doing a number of sessions on teaching executives, mostly in Europe and in Switzerland, particularly in Switzerland, around use of AI. Already I've found that I can't be bothered to talk about ethics, I can't be bothered to talk about privacy and other issues because other people are talking about them. And most AI conversations end up spending 95% of the time talking about trivial little stuff and very little time talking about, say, well, okay, I know, but how do I use it? So we had a customer that we were working with, a federal agency, and they had a challenge because they have 1,000+ employees, and they need to do a number of organizational changes as part of a transformation exercise within their business. Normally, you need to have a training program. Somebody has to make it. Then you need to get trainers that are trained on that. Then you need to organize doing the training in different places. All of this takes about 3 or 4 months. But let's get realistic about how organizations work. You know it takes 3 or 4 months, but then all of a sudden we've missed our window to do it this quarter. Then it goes into, I give you 1 day to teach managers, and then it goes down to, I'll give you 1 hour. So we know that it's a 4-month problem, but you've got 1 hour to go do it. Well, what we did for this very first exercise, particularly being playful, is how do you teach managers and leaders to have tough conversations with your staff? Have any of you been taught on doing that? Which is sad that only 2 people put up their hand, by the way. And were you taught or was it learned by doing? Were you taught or was it learned by doing? So what we then came up with is that we began to use ChatGPT and sort of very prompt engineering, it's called, to then work out how to allow employees in organizations to have the perfect conversation with their staff as and when it's needed, in whichever language they wanted, in the personal learning style of the individual. We had one manager, and their personal learning style is that they learned everything by using Star Trek as an analogy. Well, who are we to say this is right or wrong? Now, clearly, as a company, you would never build a training program based on Star Trek for your employees. Terrible idea. However, if you have one manager where for them it's the perfect way of understanding it, it's brilliant. Oh, I'll give you another little ChatGPT tip, which I find extremely useful whenever I'm doing extremely complicated things like papers, reports, long documents, things like that. This little tip, you're interested? The little tip then is to say, please read this document, and you can quite often upload the document, but please read this document and explain it to me, and in my case, using cooking as an analogy. So don't go through this gigantic, long, complicated thing. Just give me an analogy of cooking. It allows me to understand things very quickly. But I see then, as we look at this sort of AI evolution, sort of revolution coming in, the technology itself allows us to save money, do things faster. So I'm a capitalist. I would imagine most of you here are capitalists, even if we'd like to be socially minded. And if we could employ 2 people instead of 50, we would normally, outside of certain circumstances, always employ 2. And even if we would like to employ 50, if our nearest competitor only employs 2, we're screwed. So what I see is happening then is that this sort of use of these technologies will become massively widespread, maybe a little bit slower than it looks. But remember, when we looked at the slide, this sort of progress of ChatGPT has all been within less than 1 year, and it can't be stopped. Oops, gadget. I think the next thing then is that I've shared a little bit of personal stories, a little bit about leadership pieces, because I think there is a huge opportunity on that. Things that we were just not possible to do, we can now do. But I see it fascinating looking about how we can use AI to power business growth. Even to the extent that sometimes you don't necessarily have the right expertise in the room, or you need to have the right ideas, the right concepts, kind of on the fly. How many of you have ever heard of something called personas? So in design thinking, if you've ever had a customer beforehand, you clearly have many customers, hopefully, and your customers are different types. So think of these as target segments, market segments. It's very, very easy in product development. It's easy when you're designing an organization to forget about some of your segments. Misprioritize. We were speaking to a lady that writes press releases in the fragrance industry, but it's very easy to sometimes forget your customer. A nice tip about how do you do business growth is you can have your AI imagine that they are your customers. So please, can you imagine 5 buyers of fragrances? What do they want? What do they like? What are their pictures? If you remember my AI cookbook, I actually have been making the recipes. The first set of recipes that I made didn't taste very good. It got the moisture all wrong and it made a mess. I'm an idiot, and I'm a very clever idiot. So I asked GPT to say, well, how can I make these recipes better? It told me. I then said, okay, I'm still an idiot, and I've never written a cookbook before because I'm doing something brand new to me. How do I write a cookbook? It told me how. I then said, okay, well, what people work on a cookbook? It told me who they are. So in my cookbook, so now let's imagine my cookbook has, here is the country, here is its traditional dessert. I then have 2 AIs that are pretending to be expert chefs, and they make extra recipes. But it then turns out that those extra recipes aren't perfect. There are issues with them. And my cookbook, I can only have 2 recipes, not 6. So I've now got variants. A very good thing. What then happens is that I now have the AI come up with 5 pretend experts. And these pretend experts are expert on food nutrition, recipe tasting. They then provide their feedback to the 2 imaginary chefs. So now we have a ranked ordered list. Then we get the recipes out. I then have the AIs have pretend conversations with each other. Very, very funny. They're WhatsApp conversations with emojis. We then end up with 2 perfect recipes, and yet that's not good enough. I then have got the AI pretend to be 5 amateur chefs, and they pretend to make the recipes. And they provide feedback on how to improve the instructions, such as it says roll out the dough, but it doesn't say how thick. What that does is that when I did this the first time round, this took me hours. What gets interesting is that when you know a basic bit of programming, a basic bit about how APIs work, I can now do 1,000 of those in 10 minutes. This is a radical change about how things work. And I think what's interesting for you guys now, and by the way, I'm sorry that the icon didn't come out because it was going to be a nice little flag. But if you look at a country like yours, the potential that is here, which has always been here, is still desperately waiting to be tapped. There's a huge power, a huge human potential that is here to be unleashed. It is entirely plausible that an economy like yours, a society like yours, could actually become an AI-powered economy. After all, many of your engineers have already been building the technology that does this, but wouldn't it be nice if you, your families, the citizens were able to take advantage of those benefits? It's going to be tricky. There will be issues. It's important to have education, etc., etc. But for me, I really do see this AI thing as being, first of all, entirely inevitable anyway. But I do see this as offering tremendous opportunities. And with that, please connect with me. This is my LinkedIn thing again. And I'd like to say thank you very much for the invitation, shukran, and to be continued. Thank you.